Good evening. Thank you very much for joining us on Nationwide. We're live in Abuja. I'm Ruth Aguela. President Muhammadu Buhari has described as reassuring the giant strides being recorded by the Nigerian army in the ongoing counter-insurgency operations and urged the service to neither relent nor be lenient with the criminal elements as efforts are intensified towards making Boko Haram a thing of the past. The president stated this while granting audience to the Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Tukur Yusuf Buratai, who for the first time made public the casualty figure on the side of the terrorists. Let's hear from State House correspondent Adamu Sambo.
For over 2 months, the Army Chief, Lieutenant General Tukur Buratai, had been in the front line with officers and soldiers committed to putting an end to the menace of Boko Haram and other criminal elements in the northeast. He is here to give President Muhammadu Buhari details on the military operations, achievements recorded so far, and the next plan of action.
The troops' morale is very high, while in the field some of them are even ready to stand between me and the bullet. They are ready to take the bullet for me. So I'm very much impressed and happy with my officers and soldiers. So far, over 1,429 of these Boko Haram terrorists have been neutralized, and we have arrested over 116 Boko Haram terrorist informants, their spies, and their couriers on logistics, and their coordinators in the villages, in towns, and even in the forests. Our intelligence corps, along with the Department of State Services, and of course our good friends, the civilian JTF, have worked very hard to see that this is achieved.
President Muhammadu Buhari described as fulfilling that efforts made so far in the renewed fight against terrorism and insurgency have paid off and applauded the troops for exhibiting high sense of courage and patriotism.
As far as the operation in the northeast, Mr. President is happy, highly elated, and this is an encouragement to me and the troops. And I urge them to maintain this high standard of operational capability, so that not only in the northeast, other troops in the other areas are also will do the same. Just like what is happening in the northwest, the troops are determined. We are giving them the necessary support. We are reinforcing the troops in the northwest. We are also getting more equipment for them to operate with. The overall plan is to rid the whole of the northwest, and of course, imagine threats that are coming up in in other parts of the country, especially the north central, and of course, south, west, southeast, and the south. So it's a comprehensive approach to tackle any insecurity that is emerging.
The Nigerian Army, Lieutenant General Buratai, however, said will continue to synergize with other services and security agencies in the task of securing Nigeria for effective service delivery. From the State House, Adamu Sambu, NTA News.
And still talking security, many were left stranded between Donga and Bali Road after villages in Bali local government area of Taraba State came under attacks by militia groups. Joseph Ortson reports that the attacks are the latest consequences of the Jukun and Tif crisis, which led to the killings of a clergy.
This is a common scene along Mararaban Donga to Bali Road nowadays. People, mostly women and children, fleeing crisis-affected villages with few belongings for safety. Some say they are heading to Bali town to take refuge.
They find the bone house until where the hearing just moved.
Many houses were burned, including those of a bullet head and a youth leader. These attacks came only a few days after the killing, also by militia group, of a pastor of CRCN church in Mararaba Donga local government.
Stakeholders have continued to call on government to take necessary steps and stop the crisis before it gets out of hand.
For the three arms of government to intervene, go and ask What's the problem? If the issue of boundary adjustment, the federal government should help us so that the killing will stop in the state.
And this is a rainy season. Farmers are supposed to be on their farms to safeguard food, state of the nation. And so it is unacceptable. The federal government must also step in quickly.
The recent Jukung and Thief crisis, which started in Okari last year, has escalated to all parts of southern Taraba senatorial zone in Jalingo. Joseph Sound Utsen, NTA News.
In another development, scores of armed bandits have been neutralized and their weapons destroyed in airstrikes executed by the air component of Operation Hadirin Daji at two separate bandit camps, Sibiri and Manyanzurmi local government areas of Zamfara State. In a statement signed by the Coordinator, Defense Media Operations, Major General John Eneche said this was recorded on June 6, 2020 as part of offensive operations to rid the northwestern, north-central states of armed banditry. The air interdiction mission at Sibiri, located 15 kilometers east of Zurmi, was executed after credible human intelligence reports. Two Nigerian Air Force attack helicopters were then dispatched, scoring accurate hits on the target area, leading to the destruction of the structures which stored weapons and ammunition and also neutralized the bandits in their huts and surrounding bushes. The attack helicopters conducted similar airstrikes on another camp south of Manyang, which also resulted in the killing of more armed bandits, including some of their leaders as they gathered for a meeting at the location. The Chief of Air Staff, Air Marshal Sadiq Abubakar, commends the air component of Operation Hadirin Daji for their professionalism. Let's look at the judiciary. Bala Hamisu, the Taraba State kidnapper, popularly known as Wadume, and 6 others have been arraigned on amended charges before Justice Binta Murtala Nyako of the Federal High Court, Abuja. Only 7 out of the 20 defendants expected in court were arraigned. They were arraigned on 13-count charge, bordering on terrorism, kidnapping, and dealing in prohibited firearms. The defendants pleaded not guilty to the charges. The prosecution counsel, Shuaibu Labarang, informed the court that efforts have been made with arresting authority to track down the other defendants, though he did not oppose the bail applications by the defendants' counsels. He, however, said it will not stop the accelerated trial of the case. 22nd of June has been fixed for the trial. And still on judiciary, a Federal Capital Territory High Court sitting in Apo has declared as illegal the continued stay of Peter Ame as the chairman of the Inter-Party Advisory Council following the deregistration of 74 political parties by INEC. The court affirms Leonard Nzewa as the interim chairman of the IPAC on grounds that the action of the 18 existing political parties remain valid and cannot be voided. Justice Binta Mohammed held that the membership of Peter Ame to the IPAC is tied to his party's membership of the council. But with the deregistration of 74 political parties, including his party, Progressive People's Alliance, has made his membership of the IPAC terminated. The judge says he cannot keep something or nothing and expect it to stand. Therefore, his claim to the leadership of IPAC is baseless, and the action of the 18 remaining political parties in electing new IPAC president stands. And to the legislature, the Deputy President of the Senate, Ovie Omo-Agege, has denied asking the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission to probe the Minister of Niger Delta Affairs. In a statement by the Special Advisor on Media and Publicity to the Deputy Senate President, Yomi Odonuga, Senator Omo-Agege explained that a letter said to have emanated from the clerk of the Senate acting on his behalf and requesting the chairman of the Anti-Graft Agency, Ibrahim Magu, to investigate the minister did not come from him. The Deputy President of the Senate described the document as fake, insisting that he never instructed the clerk or any other person to contact the EFCC to investigate any individual, as called on the public to disregard the latter. To all the issues, Information and Culture Minister Lai Mohammed says as the federal government gradually opens up after the total lockdown to contain the spread of COVID-19, just like the rest of the world, with domestic flights due to begin by the end of June, it is also set to put in place a new protocol for safety and security for all. The minister stated this in an address to the 63rd meeting of the United Nations West African Tourism Commission for Africa. Anthony Forsen has more.
For us in Africa, after the pandemic, focusing on rural tourism will help speed up the recovery process in the travels and tourism sector.
The virtual meeting had African ministers of culture and tourism participating. The meeting focused on mitigating the negative impact of COVID-19 and how to rise above board in strengthening the sector in a post-COVID-19 era. It is in this line that Information and Culture Minister Lai Mohammed chronicled the Nigerian experience and how the Nigerian government is handling the situation. Lai Mohammed said, while there is no clear indication on how the world has changed, the ability to adapt and recover fast is a pointer to the resilience which the travel and tourism sector must leverage on now.
The sector is a driver of growth and economic prosperity, accounting for 1 in every 10 jobs globally. The employment opportunities provided by the sector benefit a wide variety of people, especially the low-skilled, the youth and women.
The minister enumerated palliatives put in place to cushion the impact of the disease on the entire populace, as well as policies put in place to aid businesses to grow.
This is because rural tourism employs more people in Africa. And here I'm talking about arts, crafts, culture and heritage. It is however imperative for the UNWTO to support Africa with a Marshall Plan of sorts and grants.
The federal government of Nigeria, the minister added, is not resting on its oars to ensure that Nigerians live well and stay safe. In their submission, Chairman of CAF, Ronald Chitotela, and the Secretary General of the United Nations World Tourism Organization, Zura Pololikashvili, enumerated the depth of the impact of COVID-19 on the tourism sector and called on member states to rise up to the challenge by putting in place necessary mechanisms that will propel an instant recovery of the sector after what has been lost within the lockdown and travel restrictions. The 63rd UNWTO Regional Commission for Africa meeting was scheduled to hold in Victoria, Seychelles in February this year before it was suspended as a preventive measure amidst COVID-19 outbreak. In Abuja, Anthony Forsen, NTA News.
A look at the environment now. Every year on the 8th of June, global attention is drawn to the wealth of marine and coastal biodiversity by commemorating World Ocean Day. For this year, 2020, the day highlights interlinkages of the problems humanity face and opportunities to harness ocean resources in a safe manner. Onengi Fineface has more.
Covering approximately 71% of Earth's surface, the ocean is responsible for 97% of water on Earth and serves as the largest source of protein, with billions of people depending on its biodiversity for their livelihoods. World Oceans Day 2020 provides an opportunity for the global community to honor, help protect and conserve the ocean.
When we say we want to conserve oceans, what we mean is that even the land that surrounds the ocean have to be conserved, because a lot of marine animals come out to come and breed at the beaches. So if you destroy their habitat, how do you protect them?
The theme, Innovations for a Sustainable Ocean, draws public attention to the impact of human actions on the ocean, develop a worldwide movement of citizens for the ocean, and mobilize people to manage marine and coastal biodiversity in a sustainable manner.
We need to ensure that our water bodies are not contaminated. Our water bodies do not become scenes of dangerous and destructive exploitation. They don't deny our fishers from getting the fish on which they survive.
Emphasis is placed on celebrating the beauties, wealth and promise of the ocean. In Abuja, Onengie Fineface, NTA News.
Well, it's already been established that today is World Ocean Day. So what is the role of oceans in everyday life? Well, we're about to find out. I'm being joined by via Zoom by Dr. Victor Fodoke. He is the former technical advisor, Climate Change African Union in Addis Ababa. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Fodoke. Okay, we seem to have audio problem. If we can fix that, we'll definitely rejoin him. Let's quickly head to Lagos to join my namesake, Ruth, who is already waiting to give us more reports on Nationwide. Ruth?
Hello, Ruth. The ocean produces 70% of the Earth's oxygen. It also has rich resources that are vital to man and plays a crucial role in public health, including the treatment of specific ailments. In spite of these benefits, human activities detrimental to the ocean and the marine ecosystem are increasing by the day. Environment correspondent Jennifer Igwe is set to tell us more. Hello, Jennifer.
Thank you, studio. The slogan for Ocean Day 2020 is Our Ocean, Our Future. And that is because of the connection we have with the ocean that has transcended generations and will continue. Organisms found at the depths of the ocean have helped in the treatment and knowledge of diseases and health situations affecting us. Do you know that we better understood fertilization by doing a research on horseshoe crabs? And we got more knowledge of liver by monitoring sharks. Even the remdesivir, an antiviral that is now being tested for COVID-19, is from sea sponge. And that shows the enormous resources in the ocean and the aquatic ecosystem that is beneficial to us.
Even the oxygen, production of oxygen. Most of us think that the oxygen is only majorly from the rainforest trees. But I want to tell you that there are some tiny organisms called phytoplankton in the waters. And this, because the oceans is about 2/3 of the Earth's surface. And this phytoplankton are spread all over, producing oxygen. And this oxygen is a resource to which we depend on.
Now, in spite of the huge benefits we get from the ocean, man's activities are detrimental to the ocean on a daily basis. And a good example is the case of plastic waste. Now, I'll be talking to 32-year-old Doyin Ogunye. She is an environment activist with an initiative aimed at removing plastics from the ocean. Now, with the enormous amount of plastics we have in the ocean, what can we do to check this?
The first thing we need to do is to change our mindset towards single-use plastic. Now, we have a lot of beaches in Nigeria, and most of them are riddled with a lot of plastic. And that's because people don't dispose their waste properly and people don't recycle their.
Apart from the 2020 Ocean Day slogan, the theme is also pertinent. It is Innovation for Sustainable Ocean, and it is aimed at drawing attention to new methods, ideas, products and services that can help us better harness ocean resources. Back to you, studio.
Thank you, Jennifer. Cargo operations through rail have commenced at the Apapa Seaport in Lagos. This is sequel to the signing of standards of operation procedure by major key players. Michael Olaleye reports.
Endless queue of trucks scrambling to gain access into their Apapa ports. It is a necessary hurdle that must be crossed unharmed, but businesses are feeling the huge losses with yard occupancy growing on a daily basis. The advocacy that a multimodal system of transportation could be the answer to this challenge informed the reactivation of the rail system of transportation at the seaports by the federal government. This service was in existence but put on hold for operational reasons.
We only expect this to get better. Ask me why. Because the standard gauge is just at the other side. What we're trying to do today is what? Start with this SOP on the narrow gauge so that by the time the standard gauge gets in here, it will just ride on an existing functional system.
The expectation is high as investors are already counting the benefits, especially as it relates to enhancing operational efficiency and cost reduction.
What we agreed now is 2 trains a day I mean, it's just to set off the operations. We intend to scale up to as much as 4 trains in the nearest future.
The Nigerian Shippers Council brokered the deal based on its persistence that the cost of doing business in the shipping subsector could be reduced by 35%.
We also expect that in those areas where the delivery points, there may be investments, PPP basis, could be private people, they could have warehouses, they could have trailer parks.
With this initiative, it is the expectation of key players that the calmness and serene atmosphere Apapa was once known for will soon return. In Lagos, Michael Olale, NTA News.
As the figures of new cases continue to rise, the battle against coronavirus is still fierce in Nigeria's epicenter, Lagos. To further prevent community spread of the virus, the Lagos state government has reiterated its commitment to enforcing social distancing in troubled sports, especially the local markets. Nosa Osla reports.
As Nigerians and people around the world are being asked to help halt the spread of the coronavirus, they have frequently been told to practice social distancing. The idea, according to health experts, is to flatten the curve or slow the spread of the virus, decreasing the number of people who get sick and the risk of overwhelming the medical system.
The truth is that we come back here, it's like the situation still remains the same.
I know we're a bit scared, but basically we can't keep people locked down forever. So I think right now it's time for us to be responsible.
According to the Lagos State Environmental Protection Agency, the best thing anyone can do is adhere to strict social distancing measures as outlined by the Lagos State government, as this remains the most effective way of reducing the spread of COVID-19.
We can do things to suit the current situation. Coronavirus is real. Social distancing is important. Constant hand washing is important. And with this kind of markets, we can all see by ourselves that all the rules put down is being adhered to.
The general manager added that government will not relent in sensitizing residents on the importance of social distancing, most especially at marketplaces, as it remains one of the most effective ways to reduce opportunities for disease transmission. In Lagos, Nosa Osula, NTA News.
A break now beckons. Nationwide continues in Abuja. Stay with us.
I wish to once again commend the frontline workers across the country who, on a daily basis, risk everything to ensure we win this fight. For those who got infected in the line of duty, rest assured that government will do all it takes to support you and your families during this exceedingly difficult period. I will also take this opportunity to assure you all that your safety, well-being, and welfare remains paramount to our government. I am using this opportunity to express our deepest condolences to the families of all Nigerians that have lost their loved ones as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. This is our collective loss, and we share your grief.
5 years of environmental remediation under President Buhari. This week on NTA Tuesday Live, how far with the Ogoni cleanup, Great Green Wall, coastal and soil erosion, and water hyacinth? What are the other interventions and strategies in tackling environmental challenges? Join us at 10:30 p.m. for answers and more on NTA Tuesday Live. Don't miss it.
As a strong immune system increases the chances of victims surviving COVID-19. A corruption-free society creates opportunities for citizens to thrive and prosper. Build your immunity. Stop corruption now. Report all acts of corruption to ICPC on this toll-free number 0800 2255 4272. This message is brought to you by ICPC and NTA.
Nigerians, let us take responsibility. Stay healthy, stay safe, and curb the spread of the virus. Take responsibility. The coronavirus spreads from one person to another. Let us avoid crowd gathering of any kind for any reason. Take responsibility. Avoid traveling from one state to another during this lockdown restriction. By all the rules that are put in place, take responsibility. Stop spreading fake news and unverified reports about the coronavirus. There is no known cure for COVID-19. Take responsibility. Observe all the measures that can help stop the spread of the virus. Together, we can do this, but only if we take responsibility. This message is brought to you by the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, Africa's largest television network. We have observed the lockdown. We have practiced the measures in order to curb the spread of the virus, but we can do better. The coronavirus spread is increasing daily, and only together can we cut down the numbers and defeat the spread of the virus. Remember, COVID-19 is not a death sentence, and a recovered patient cannot spread the disease. Do not stigmatize. Do not hesitate to report any case, or if you have come in contact with anybody that has been infected with COVID-19. If you have cough and fever, please stay at home and call your state hotline. Find state numbers at www.
The daily briefing by the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 just got started. Let's join them.
May I now invite the chairman of the Presidential Task Force to the podium to please make his remarks. The chairman.
Members of the Presidential Task Force, distinguished ladies and gentlemen of the press, good afternoon, and let me welcome you all to the national briefing for Monday, the 8th of June, 2020. This briefing is significant because Nigeria on Saturday, 6 June 2020, reached the milestone of 100 days since the index case was recorded. You will all recall that the index case was recorded on 27 February 2020. The COVID-19 has taken the entire world by storm because it has disrupted all known systems, including governance, economy, financial system, travels, and healthcare. Even the best of healthcare systems and arrangements succumbed to the force of the virus. Within our national setting, the weaknesses inherent in our national healthcare systems were made glaring and needed urgent attention. Government determined immediately to take on the lessons and to ensure that the healthcare system experienced tremendous leap in human and infrastructure development, as well as policy focus, stability, and direction. Within the 100 days under review, the following modest accomplishments were recorded. 1, the number of laboratories in the COVID-19 network has increased from the bare minimum of 2 with which the Nigerian Center for Disease Control started with, to 30, with a laboratory in every geopolitical zone in the country providing increased access to testing. 2, over 80,000 tests have been conducted in the country. Over 13,000 health workers have been trained increasing the human resource available for case management, and more personal protective equipment and ventilators have been procured and prepositioned across the country. The number of beds available for isolation and case management has increased from 3,000 beds to about 5,000 beds nationwide. We have developed new guidelines for home care and general case management. 6, we've evacuated over 1,000 Nigerians from different parts of the world while still reviewing the evacuation and quarantine protocols. There has been enhancement in the efficiency of the identification, testing, evacuation, and isolation process for confirmed cases. 9, we have gradually reopened the economy, balancing between lives and livelihoods. We are working on a mid-term action review in accordance with WHO guidelines, with lessons and recommendations being used to improve the response. We have introduced community engagement and risk communication as critical factors that will help to flatten the curve in a. And 12, we've engaged with development partners and the private sector to grow the capacity of the nation in the response. And finally, we continue to introduce several non-pharmaceutical interventions to ongoing infrastructure interventions being made by government development partners. The last 100 days has also brought out the best in the spirit of Nigerians. There has been tremendous private sector and corporate mobilization. Similarly, individuals have also sacrificed their little savings for the good of all. What this underscores is the strength of our communal culture and unity in our diversity. The Presidential Task Force in the face of a global pandemic, even when humanity. In spite of these accomplishments, Nigeria, like the rest of the world, has witnessed a steady rise in the numbers of infections. As at midnight on Sunday the 7th, Nigeria had the following statistics. Confirmed cases were 12,486, 959, and we had a record of fatalities of 354. And data as guiding beacons, it has become obvious that Nigeria has entered the community transmission phase. This has significantly helped in identifying the 20 high-burden local governments that account for 60% of infections in Nigeria. The Presidential Task Force is already pursuing precision actions on these high-burden local governments. It is therefore important for Nigerians to recognize the need to take responsibility and the significant role community ownership and risk communication will play in the future of our national response. Over the last weekend, the ease of restriction on places of worship came into focus. It is important to note that the guidelines give states the latitude and the opportunity to negotiate protocols that meet their peculiarities. We therefore urge our religious leaders and the entire populace to adhere to the guidelines issued by the Presidential Task Force and the protocols agreed by the state governments. The Presidential Task Force will continue to monitor compliance nationwide. The Presidential Task Force wishes to emphasize that a great majority of Nigerians are still susceptible to COVID-19, and if we allow it to transmit easily between us, it may even be more deadly. If everyone diligently observes the guidelines, we can collectively control the spread of the virus and help to protect our health facilities as well as save lives. On 6 June 2020, the Presidential Task Force also visited the National Reference Laboratory to witness firsthand the processes for testing. Experience, as it is said, is the best teacher. We can confirm that the process is rigorous, thorough, and demanding. From the laboratories to the nurses, to our doctors and other medical personnel, enormous sacrifice is being made by Nigerians. Ladies and gentlemen, I have considered it important to reiterate appreciation of the entire nation to all our frontline workers who toil around the clock to ensure that we remain safe in this country. The visit has revealed the huge responsibilities shouldered by these young and committed professionals, as well as the risk that they face on a daily basis. The visit also enabled the Presidential Task Force to listen to challenges faced at the National Reference Lab and to recognize such challenges as opportunities because they represent motivations for action. The shortage of reagents and supply chain issues are global issues because the entire world is seeking to purchase the same commodities. To the Presidential Task Force, the motivation for action is to look inward, plan ahead, and develop our domestic capacities. This is because COVID-19 is neither the first nor will it be the last pandemic. What is certain is that we must not allow the next pandemic to catch us unprepared. The strategic thrust of the national response is to test and test. However, the visit to the National Reference Laboratory has shown that while we ramp up capacity for testing, we must also enhance the skills and size of manpower to run the laboratories. Moving from 2 to a network of 30 technology-driven laboratories and coordinating them is certainly not a small feat. It is therefore significant to mention that a major outcome of the 100 Days assessment is the recognition of the need for states to scale up responsibility for their public health response in the medium to long term. We hope to build a network of state public health labs that will bring about sustainability in public health response in Nigeria. Since the commencement of our national response, a lot of priority has been given to physical health management of people who are affected. I am pleased to inform you that the Presidential Task Force has commenced the process of integrating comprehensive psychological services program into its activities. This will be for the benefit of people who are in isolation, well-being of their families, and the communities. In this regard, we wish to recognize the Federal Medical Center Jabi FCT for spearheading this drive, which shall inevitably assume a national dimension because of the importance of mental health. As we mark the 100 days after the index case, we remember all Nigerians who have passed away from this disease. We commiserate with their families and friends who have had to deal with the difficulty of losing loved ones at this time. We pray that God will continue to console them and heal our land. At this juncture, ladies and gentlemen, the Presidential Task Force appreciates the World Health Organization, the African Center for Disease Control, the West African Health Organization, the United Nations Family, European Union, and a host of other partners for the support we have received so far. Finally, I wish to state that in the absence of a vaccine, and supportive management of confirmed cases, we urge all Nigerians to take individual and collective responsibility in adhering to public health advice, such as good hand hygiene through hand washing or use alcohol-based sanitizers, use of face masks in public places, and observance of physical or social distancing of at least 2 meters apart. I now call on the Honorable Minister of Health, the DG Nigerian Center for Disease Control, and the National Coordinator to update you before we take your questions for today. And thank you for listening. Have a good evening.
Good afternoon, everyone. The Secretary to the Government of the Federation and Chair of the PTF, Honorable Ministers, Director General, Permanent Secretaries, ladies and gentlemen. Saturday, the 6th of June 2020, marked 100 days since the first confirmed case of COVID-19 was diagnosed in Nigeria. In that period, we have seen a lot and learned a lot about this novel virus, about which so little was known at the inception, and about which not yet all is known at the moment. I used that occasion to give a live update on our nation's response on the Federal Ministry of Health social media platforms. It was an update and a situation analysis. In these 100 days, we have tested over 76,800 persons, recorded 12,486 confirmed COVID-19 cases in 35 states and the Federal Capital Territory, successfully treated and discharged 3,959 persons, but sadly lost 354 Nigerians, most of whom had underlying illnesses. May their souls rest in peace. We commiserate with their families, and as we do that, we also appreciate our healthcare workers who put their health, their lives on the line and do all they have been taught to do to keep us safe. Our response during this period was focused and targeted at the initial phase on screening travelers at points of entry, testing for virus importation, tracing their contacts, and isolating positive cases. It seemed with that we were safe for a while. But since our entry into the community transmission phase, we have begun to see more figures rising, and has also caused us to become more aggressive in tracking and testing and increasing our laboratory network capacity from 2 at the start to 30 molecular laboratories, with a plan for at least 1 laboratory in every state. This way, the turnaround time will be reduced to a minimum, and case finding and management will run more smoothly. The management of infected cases is being reviewed regularly and improved with revised clinical guidelines to be published in accordance with learnings and evolving dynamics associated with COVID-19 and global best practices. This includes new discharge protocols, treatment regimen for asymptomatic or symptomatic cases with various clinical manifestations. We continue to collaborate with all states and Federal Capital Territory with regard to their management of cases, with provision of commodities, training, and other technical support where needed. A 2-day webinar held on the 3rd and 4th of June on the effect of COVID-19 on health and care management of the elderly was conducted in collaboration with the West African Health Organization, and it took a critical look at various aspects of the impact of the disease on the elderly, who are usually at higher risk of infection. The outcome of the webinar provides grounds for policy direction for care of the elderly during and beyond COVID-19. The general recommendation still remains that senior citizens, being vulnerable, should stay home most times, and if they have to go out, wear a mask once outside their homes. This morning, the Federal Ministry of Health received the report of the ministerial task team that went to Kano to support the government there in the COVID-19 response with commodities, ambulances, training, technical and confidence-building measures. The visit turned out to be a game changer and improved the indices for Kano. It was extended to fact-finding missions to offer support to 5 other states in the northern part of the country, where the impact was also very well valued and visible. With the observations and recommendations from the 3-week assignment, the committee developed a strategic incident action plan to strengthen coordination capacity of the health workers and improve community engagement in line with our response plan. We know that the healthcare workers in Kano and many parts of the northern areas of our country had become very jittery at the advent of coronavirus disease and had stopped or slowed down attending to other patients, which led to complications in the healthcare delivery. Moreover, many of them had become infected, and while over 150 health workers had been infected at the time of the arrival of the team, After they conducted their training on infection prevention and control, there was no report of infections among the healthcare workers who had received training. This way, their confidence was restored and service was also restored in essential and routine case management and also COVID-19 management. With regard to the unexplained deaths in Kano, which occurred in April over a 5-week period, the team confirmed that a total of 979 deaths were actually recorded in 8 municipal local government areas in the state, and at a rate of 43 deaths per day, as measured by counting activities at the graveyards. The peak was in the second week of April, and by the end of April, the numbers had started to reduce and had finally now settled at 11 deaths per day, which was about what it was before. The verbal autopsy that we spoke of revealed that about 56% of the deaths had occurred at home, while 38 were in a hospital, and with the circumstantial evidence as all to go by, the investigation suggests that 50 to 60% of the deaths may have been triggered by or due to COVID-19 in the face of pre-existing ailments. A significant part was also triggered by inability to access routine care at the time due to the scare of COVID-19. Most of the fatalities were over 65 years old. I wish to thank Dr. Guazo, Professor Nasidi, and members of their team, particularly those who came from Irua, for diligently carrying out their assignment. It is gratifying to note that they all returned safely and had no incident of contracting infection. I must also commend His Excellency, the Governor of Kano State, for the full support he gave to the team to achieve their targets. Finally, I wish to again remind everyone that wearing your face mask at all times in the public, or even inside your house when you are not sure of your visitors or your company, or if you are in a crowded environment, is a very valuable safety precaution for you, your family, and your friends. I also urge everybody, as I do every day, to observe your respiratory hygiene, especially when you are coughing or sneezing. Use a tissue, please, and discard it immediately after. Use sanitizers as often as you can, and observe physical distancing. Thank you all for your attention. I shall now invite the NCDC Director General.
Thank you, Honorable Minister for Health, Secretary to the Government of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Honorable Ministers, gentlemen of the press. Good to see you again this evening. Over the weekend, like you know, we got to 100 days of this pandemic in Nigeria since the first case was confirmed. Not a landmark we want to celebrate, but one that cost us reason to reflect on the very hard work being done by colleagues across the country, including yourselves, in the work that you're doing. It's been 100 days of resilience, hard work, and sacrifice by many people, and that work unfortunately has to continue as we continue to respond to this new situation. Now, like you know, we're going to have to focus a lot of our response over the next few weeks on the states. And the set of professionals that work in every state that have had to take on a lot more responsibility. They're called the state epidemiologists and their teams. State disease surveillance and notification officers also exist at the local governments, but they're all coordinated at the states. In many states, there are also the incident managers of the emergency operations centers, and they are the heart of our collaboration with the states. So on Friday, we had a Zoom conference, as we have these days with many groups, with all of them, to really encourage them in the work they've been doing over the past 3 months, and encourage them and speak with them, understand their challenges, and offer solutions, exchange ideas, and also enable a platform where they exchange ideas with each other. They are the focal people of the public health response in every state. They manage the surveillance, emergency operations, response, and data collection, organizing the labs, reagents, and all of that at the various state levels. So a lot of responsibility on their heads. So really, that meeting on Friday provided us an opportunity to engage, to brainstorm on some of the challenges, and to set new milestones for ourselves in terms of how we are going to improve the work that we're doing with each other. But also, there are a few opportunities coming their way to support the work that we're doing. We're looking for resources wherever possible to make their life easier. And one thing that we must get out of this outbreak is really to build a network around them. So very often in the past, they have not really been recognized in their responsibility in the work that they're doing on all our behalfs. But in effect, to do that work effectively, they need the resources. So it is really, they are the first people we call when we hear there's a case of X or Y, or there's a cluster of unknown illness or unknown deaths. Our first response is always to call the state epidemiologists. And very often they don't have the resources to go into the rural areas to go and investigate these things. So we're looking for various opportunities, and there are some opportunities in the horizons to support them to be able to do their work better. But critically, we've also been advocating to the state governors. This outbreak has brought their public health teams much closer together with the leadership of every state. So now, most state governors now know their state epidemiologists very well. And that relationship will grow over the next few years, because we will not return to a country with the health security architecture that we had in the past. We will need to build on what we have learned from this outbreak to design a health security architecture for the future. And this means that we'll need to use technology, use our platforms, and build a lot more closer relationship across the different tiers of government, from the federal at the NCDC level to the state epidemiologists in the teams and the disease surveillance and notification officers in every local government area. And so finally, we're working with the World Bank right now to design some high impact interventions that will get support. And we hope that out of this, we will build an agile, flexible workforce for health security in Nigeria that will be responsive and able to react, use technology, have the best access to diagnostics, and really make sure that we're much better positioned to prevent, detect, and respond. So this group of healthcare workers will become, like they are, frontline soldiers in the fight against infectious diseases. But for them to do this, we must equip them with the skills, the knowledge, the equipment, the resources, the physical infrastructure, the vehicles, the motorcycles, the phones, and the resources they need to do the hard work they do on our behalf. So as we got to the 100-day mark, this is really where we focused on our reflection today, and we're happy to host the chair of the Presidential Task Force at the National Reference Lab and share some of the work being done by the colleagues in that lab. But we also want to focus a little bit on testing altogether. Across the country, we now have reagents to test close to 200,000 samples across every lab in our network. we really need to work with the state epidemiologists over the next week to collect the samples. If you look at the data carefully today, we had the highest number of cases reported from a new state, from Abia State, because they ramped up their testing. And they're doing the right thing, because you can only understand the burden of disease that you have if you test more. And by the time you understand the burden of your disease, you are able to plan an appropriate response. So over the weekend, we discussed with the leadership of the health sector in Abia State in terms of how to improve their response to be able to cater for their new cases, and they're on top of it. And this is really what we're encouraging every state to do. Let's work together, test more people, make sure we understand where we are, and then respond. Thank you very much.
The chairman of the Presidential Task Force, honorable ministers, members of the PTF, ladies and gentlemen of the press, good evening. So today the Presidential Task Force met and discussed the proposed new protocol for the evacuation of Nigerians. One of the key rules of the PTF is to make sure that we have a multi-sectoral, effective partnership between the different agencies of government. I would like to first of all start by thanking those Nigerians that are currently abroad for their patience and understanding while we review the protocol. It's essential that this time around we get it right. It's also important that we make the best use of the public resources available to us so that we have an arrangement that is sustainable and that would allow the more than 4,000 Nigerians that are currently outside the country to come in. And at the same time, the PTF has a responsibility of mitigating risk and ensuring that we do not increase the number of cases of COVID we have in country or increase the risk of transmission. And we have looked at the various options available, and I'm grateful to the private sector, particularly the Aliko Dangote Foundation, for stepping up and supporting the testing that will be required for the Nigerians coming in. So we've gone through the protocol today, and effectively it has been signed off, but there will be additional work required across the different agencies of government to make sure that things go smoothly. But strictly speaking, I don't see any reason why this cannot proceed as quickly as possible. This is, just to clarify, this is a joint teamwork with the different agencies of government, ranging from Federal Ministry of Health, the Nigeria Center for Disease Control, the Federal Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Nigeria Diaspora Commission, immigration authorities, security agencies, and the aviation sector. The key part of the proposal is that there will be a need for Nigerians that are currently outside the country to undergo a PCR test for COVID-19 before they board. These tests need to be valid at least for 14 days. In other words, if the test is done beyond 14 days, then it will not be accepted. And prior to boarding, they will be required to provide an undertaking that they will follow the necessary precautions that we have applied when they come into country. This will include the need for them to make themselves available for a repeat PCR test in country when they arrive within 72 hours. They will be given an appointment card and an address where they will go and have the test done. They would also be required to stay in the points of entry. This will be Lagos and Abuja for now, because these are the two cities where the flights will be coming in, and these are the arrangements we've done with the private sector. They will need to stay in Abuja or Lagos and make arrangements for their own accommodation in these two cities for the period of 14 days. The main difference with what we have been doing in the past is, unlike in the past, we will not be responsible for the transportation or the accommodation of Nigerians coming in. they will need to make their own alternative arrangements to stay in Lagos or Abuja, not only for the period of testing, but also for the period of self-isolation. But they can, if they wish, stay at home, provided they undergo self-isolation at home. They will be tested when they arrive. They would have had a test. It has to be negative before they board the flight. And when they come in within a 72-hour period, they will have a repeat test to make sure that they have not developed COVID. They will then be followed up through a strict process of supervised isolation, where they will be contacted on a regular basis every day and monitored for the presence of symptoms that might require them to be taken into treatment if they subsequently become positive. These changes will be in line with international practice, and the country will actually be doing a lot more than other countries are doing at the moment. It's important that we get this process to work, because we have more than 4,000 Nigerians outside the country. We need to smoothen it. We need to make sure that we can bring up to 1,000 Nigerians per week, so that we clear the backlog over the next 4 weeks. In terms of prioritizing, again, the Federal Ministry of Foreign Affairs will provide additional detail to the relevant Nigerian missions, but all Nigerians abroad will be required to register themselves with the relevant Nigerian missions. The Nigerian missions will coordinate and provide clearance for the evacuation of Nigerians. For the moment, we are going to place emphasis on people in challenging circumstances abroad, including short-term visitors, those on medical and official trips, those on family holidays, pregnant women, elderly, and the students. Once they come in, they will undergo the usual necessary clearance at the airports, and their passports will be retained by immigration authorities. We will make sure that they follow the usual guidelines we have in terms of physical distancing, the use of face masks, etc. And we have already worked with the airport authorities in Lagos and Abuja to make sure adaptations are done to the airports to ensure that these policies are followed through. After the testing, they will be allowed to go home and self-isolate. We will give them a free traveler's kit, which will contain a digital thermometer, a temperature monitoring form, alcohol-based hand sanitizers, information guidelines on self-quarantine and how to do it, as well as a pamphlet on COVID-19 and some face masks. They will continue to be contacted by the relevant NCDC staff to make sure that this process is going according to plan. And again, we will plead to Nigerians to please cooperate with these guidelines, particularly those coming in, but also those that know relatives or friends that have come in from abroad. You are not supposed to join the public. You're not supposed to go out. You're not supposed to go to work. You're supposed to self-isolate at home. And if there is any violation of this, we would be interested in knowing, so that we take it up with the relevant persons. And once they complete the 14-day self-isolation, they will be signed off, and then that's it, really. They are free. People are free to go. We hope that these arrangements that will come into place as soon as possible. We're just tidying up a few things. It has been passed by the PTF. We hope that all the relevant government agencies will cooperate to make sure that this works. We do have a responsibility to make sure that we make the best use of the limited resources we have, and we devote those resources for the purpose of the COVID pandemic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We have taken all the updates. We will now take the questions.
Good evening, the SGF, honorable ministers, the DG, NCDC, and my colleagues. My name is Rahila Lassa, and I report for Voice of Nigeria. My question is for the DG, NCDC. Is disrupted. Okay, the DG, NCDC. At the initial, I just need a clarification on this. At the initial stage of the COVID-19, we saw gory images of people lying on the streets in some countries, and then some were in critical conditions even in the hospitals. But what we see now is different. We see people in isolation centers, in lively moods, some are even playing music. My question is the virus gradually losing its potency, or we are seeing a natural fizzling out of the virus now that we have ramped up our test capacity? We have more cases, but still we see like the virus is we don't see those gory images again. So I want a clarification on that. Thank you.
Good evening, all. My name is Friday Okerigbe. I'm a reporter with Channels TV. I'd like to direct my two questions to the DG NCDC. Last week, when the Kogi State Governor, announced the relaxation of the restriction he imposed on Kaba local government area, he actually said the samples the state tested using his own test kits, they all tested negative. And he said they have sent those same samples to NCDC for confirmation. I want to know if you did receive samples from Kogi State, and if you have tested those samples he said he sent to NCDC, and what is the results? I'm asking this because over the weekend we know that NCDC has reported an additional case from Kogi State. Could it be that it's from those samples that he sent in to you? The second question has to do with the target you set, target of 2 million, if I'm still very up to date. I know that we were unable to meet that target. What would you say was the major reason why that target was not met? Thank you.
Good evening all. Rachel Abuja from the News Agency of Nigeria. My first question is to the coordinator. So I would like to know the role of the NHIS in the fight against COVID-19, because it seems we don't pay for this infection in our hospital. Then my next question is for the DG NCDC. I would also like to know the role of the NCDC and state in the management of isolation centers. And I'm asking this because of an alleged case of a lawyer in Nasarawa, Lafia. So I don't know if the DG is aware of that. My third question is for the WHO rep. COVID-19 pandemic had led to the increased use of antibiotic. I would like to know what WHO is doing to stop countries from using this drug because of the resistance. Thank you very much.
The Chairman, National Coordinator, members of the PTF, my colleagues. My name is Amaka Ude. I report for Arise News. And my first question actually is for the Minister of Health. Well, last week you had told us that we'll be looking inwards in terms of home care for confirmed cases. And Lagos over the weekend actually confirmed that they have resumed home care. But of course, the NMA has kicked against this particular protocol because according to them, they said this is going to reduce, the emergency of COVID-19. But my question to you really is, do we have the human resources to manage those who will say to go home and self-isolate? This is a major concern for a lot of people, especially for those who don't stay alone. They have family members. How would they be able to take care of themselves, being monitored? Do we have enough people to go round to ensure that those who say self-isolate at home are able to do it effectively where they don't affect their family members? And my next question actually is for the chairman of the PTF. Well, the interstate travel ban and its effectiveness came into question again over the weekend, because I'm sure you must have seen the case of the woman who escaped from an isolation center in Imo State and was found in Ondo State selling in the market. And of course, this poses a lot of challenge for the NCDC, who have to now start, the rigorous contact tracing of everybody she came in contact with. But, the issue with the security at the isolation center is one, and the effectiveness, if any, of this interstate ban. Are we going to look forward to just open up the borders so that way we can have more checks on the road, but let people move around freely, more or less, is the question for you. And finally, the NCDC boss. Well, the Minister of Health has just told us now that 50 to 60% of the unexplained death out of Kano has been linked to COVID-19. So are we going to add those figures to our number of fatality in the country? Thank you.
Good evening, members of the PTF. My name is Yemi Adebayo from AIT. The SGF, sir, it's noteworthy that you led other members of the PTF to visit the National Reference Lab. I was also privileged to be there. I just want to ask you this afternoon, sir. You visited the lab, you saw the way people are working, you've seen the facilities there. Is the PTF also considering visiting the University of Abuja, the Gwagalada, the isolation center there, to see how ventilators are faring in this particular location? I ask this question because we have reports that lack of ventilators to assist a woman laboring for breath from 3 p.m. to almost the early hours of Sunday led to her death. What step is the PTF putting in place to ensure that this all-important device be supplied across the country to forestall situations like this? Then my next question is to the DG of NCDC. At least, if not 2 or 3 times now, the center has come out to apologize to states for erroneously perhaps inflating the number of cases in their state. Of latest is the one from Jigawa State. Could you please explain to Nigerians what perhaps is the problem why these figures are not so accurate when they are posted out? Then secondly, I also want to respond to this. Some members of the public are asking if it is true that NCDC is paying out 35K monthly to the vulnerable members of Nigerian society. I don't know. That's some set of Nigerians are asking this question. Is it true? How true is this? Because some people say they are receiving messages that NCDC is saying that they are paying 35K to some Nigerians. Then finally, the national coordinator, sir. I carefully listened to the protocols and guidelines you read out just now. And you did say in some of the points that Nigerians who will be evacuated, who will return, are to take responsibility of their accommodation and transportation. I want to find out from you, is it when they return back to these locations, either Lagos or Abuja, they're supposed to take up this responsibility of fending for themselves and their accommodations? Thank you very much.
Good evening, members of the PTF. My name is Juliana Taiwo Balonye. I write for the Sun newspapers. Minister of Health, I have just one question for you. We read today that there is crisis of availability of bed spaces in Lagos and Kano. So my question is, are there any plans to partner with neighboring states to make use of their, the states that have less cases? Are there plans to partner with them to make use of their facilities? Thank you.
Good evening, sirs. My name is Hassan Umar Farouk. I report for Liberty Radio and Television. My question is to the Minister of Aviation, sir. Finally, if this travel ban is lifted, sir, there is going to be fear of traveling. Sir, do you have any mechanism put in place to allay this fear to passengers? Why asking these questions? Because we see something happen in post 9/11. It takes about 5 years for this sector to recover. Do you have anything to put in place to tell Nigerians that the airspace are safe? My second question is to NCDC, sir. This is the most innovative agency recently. Are you looking for, are you exploring technology? I'm thinking about just like other countries developing an applications to trace contact tracing and to help you do your job. Thank you very much, sir.
Chairman PTF, Honourable Ministers. My name is Felix Onwa, and I'm from Reuters. I have two questions for the NCDC DG. How many contact tracers and contact tracing groups or teams do we have in the country as of today? I would also like to know how the contact tracers are coping. In this time, we are having widespread, community widespread of the virus. And how important is their role as of now?
Good evening, Chairman and members of the Presidential Task Force and Nigerians at home. My name is Mitaire Ikwe, and I report for the NTA. I have a couple of questions, and I start with the Health Minister. With the increase in confirmed cases lately, how many high-burden local government areas have joined the 20 earlier indicated by the PTF? And for the NCDC DG, I have a simple question. What accounted for the rise in cases in Abia State? For the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, with the easing of the lockdown and the decentralization of the national response to the states, what will be the focus or direction of the humanitarian response going forward? For the Education Minister, several timetables of resumption of school, especially for students taking examinations, are being bandied on social media. What is the true position of things? For the national coordinator of the PTF, from the protocols for evacuation, which you just made public and which you said are still being fine-tuned, are you suggesting that the prospective evacuees will be quarantined for 3 days when they get back to the country? And if yes, who will be responsible for the accommodation and logistics? And also for the PTF coordinator, what feedback did the PTF get on compliance with its guidelines for the reopening of public places? Thank you.
Thank you. We have taken all the questions. We will take responses from the Honorable Minister of Health, the DG NCDC, the National Coordinator, the WHO representative, Honorable Minister of Aviation, Honorable Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development, Honorable Minister of State Education, and the SGF. Let's begin with the Honorable Minister of Health.
So, good afternoon again. The first question for the Ministry of Health came from Amaka, I think, and it's about home care. Home care in COVID-19 management is something like the last card. If you have many cases turning up, you have your isolation centers, your treatment centers, your holding centers, and they are full. They start considering other options. Now, we have said many times here that the COVID-19 infection manifests in many ways, that 80%, up to 80%, will have little or no symptoms. They will have little or no symptoms. In fact, some of them feel very well. And those are the ones who do not see any reason why they should be in the hospital, why you should be holding them. I think you know the story. You have heard examples of that story. They don't see any reason why you should hold them. So it's quite difficult in some places and under certain circumstances, convincing someone who feels very well that he needs to be in isolation. And the reason for that person being in isolation really is to prevent him from infecting others. Now, that's the category that you want to put in home management, because when you cannot accommodate them all in the treatment center. So it is not those who are very sick, because those who are not sick, who are very sick, will have to be in an institution to be cared for. But the ones who feel well or have very mild symptoms are the ones who will be in home management. But before you get to home management, in fact, you have other improvised measures that are being introduced by primary health care, for example, to use dormitories and other available empty buildings. The other day we just got offer of some more buildings where we can hold people, I mean not hold them, but where we can have people stay until they are no more infectious. So the real hospital beds will be reserved for those who are sick. Now, managing people of that type sometimes is not easy because they can get restless, they want to go to work. So the kind of management you need is not necessarily much of nursing. So we need some psychological management, and you need things to occupy them with. And the human resources you require for that is not so much, it's not so high. You need counselors, you may need, that's why the primary health care comes in very useful. I've mentioned that before, at this very stage, because they're used to community, they're used to working in the communities, and they can provide human resources. Community health workers, they have thousands, so who can manage these cases successfully when it comes to that level. And they can make the necessary phone calls, they can pay necessary visits, and try and keep the people in good spirits. Now, the other one about, well, that question is actually to NCDC, but I'll just start it off and he can add to it. The question of the cases in Kano, the 50 to 60%, you remember we said we are doing verbal autopsy. Verbal autopsy means that you never really saw the patient, you never saw them. And you are trying to do circumstantial, and I like to call it circumstantial evidence. For example, we asked the relatives, what symptoms did they have? They had cough. Did they have fever? Yes, they had fever. Okay, this person, how long did the illness take? If the cough was about 6 months, 9 months, then definitely it was something else. Maybe it was TB or something else. But if the cough was just a few days, and then they had fever, they had sore throat, or whatever it is, then you make an assumption, you make what you call an educated guess that it could have been. So that's the kind of, that's what a verbal autopsy gives you. It gives you roughly an estimate. It is not something you can go to the bank with, but it gives you a good guideline of what it could have been. It is likely to have been this. So the rest of the meaning, NCDC can add to it. Now, Juliana, a very good question. If the states can partner with each other, that is actually part of what we look at. Only that once you have to have the necessary assets for that, and for that you need ambulances. Yet it's true. In fact, we do have plans to be able to move people from who are moderate and whose condition suddenly turns bad to ICU. You move them across. You can move them across the state boundary to a facility where you have ICU. If one state, for example, does not have an ICU, can do the movement that way. So that possibility is there. Perhaps the possibility, if you have an overflow, of moving more positive patients from one facility to a neighboring state. You know that Lagos and Ogun State, for example, are almost contiguous, and it did happen that the index case that came into Nigeria was actually in Ogun and was moved to Lagos. So it's not something that has never happened. It can happen that, yes, one state will support the other, particularly with the nature and quality and the type of care that is required. I think that answers all the questions for the health sector.
So thank you. A lot of questions today. So the first one was on not seeing gory pictures of more severe cases. I think that's a good thing, actually. But having said that, we've lost 354 people that we know of. Each individual in this case is someone's brother, wife, father. Some of them I know personally, some we've met in the course of work here. Of course, there are many healthcare workers infected. So really, I think let's not jump to conclusions, but we are happy so far that we haven't seen the level of severity that we have seen in other contexts. We don't wish for that level of severity, but we must not drop our guards. So we must keep working very hard, because sometimes these things come in phases, and really it depends on us, on how hard we work on all these interventions that we're talking about. They're not academic discussions. They really do have an impact. So the more aggressive we are in preventing transmission, the less likely we are that we'll see those severe cases and deaths. So we must keep pushing at this. On Kogi, I really want to not answer too many questions on Kogi, because we have to just keep pushing on the right things. The extra case we announced was referred to a health center in Abuja. We get the samples. At NCDC, sometimes we don't even know where the sample has come from exactly. Our role is to get the sample, do the test, send the result back, do the surveillance, analyze the data, use it to make public health decisions. And no, we haven't received any extra samples to test, but we also don't just test random samples collected. Every sample must be linked to an individual by the time it gets to us. The question on our responsibility at treatment centers. Yes, I did see that tweet circulating. It's unfortunate. Everybody knows NCDC doesn't run any treatment center anywhere in the country, not in Lagos, not in FCT, not in any state. Our role is a national public health institute. Our patients are populations. We don't deal with individual patient care. We deal with populations. That is the mandate of this agency. So in terms of case management, where our responsibility ends is in providing, supporting clinical guidelines, the development of clinical guidelines, mentorship and things like that for the different infectious diseases. But we don't manage centers. But we also know that every state is struggling. And for every negative story, if you look hard, you'll find 10 positive stories. I know for a fact that many states are working very hard to improve the conditions of their treatment centers. Very early, we saw a lot of those stories. Now they're an exception. And that's why when you find one, people recognize it, because most of the stories are actually positive. So Nasarawa is trying very hard. Maybe one individual had a bad experience. I know that they have seen this, and I know that they will improve, try very hard to improve the care that they're providing. The story of 35,000 being paid to Nigerians by NCDC. This morning, we attended to the Public Accounts Committee at the House of Representatives. That's where we were this morning. So every naira we spend, it's not none of our private companies. We will be accountable for it. So there will never be a time where money will be given out like that. So I think when people make comments like that, it actually shows some deficit in understanding in how government works. No chief executive or no accounting officer actually has the power to distribute finances unless it's part of a defined program. In terms of contact tracing, there were two questions that are linked. The groups, how many groups are doing contact tracing? Can we use an app for contact tracing? We're looking at all this. Remember, some states are already doing it. Lagos has a specific app they're using. Kaduna has an app they're using. Contact tracing is a responsibility of the state government. We support them in doing this, and all the data has to come back into the national surveillance database called SORMAS. So really that's our role in making sure we support their doing this. So the situation is always different in the different states, how they're able to manage this. So this is a state government responsibility, and we support them in many ways, and some are adopting technology to different extents. And yes, apps are good, but apps will not finally solve the problem. You still have to identify who the contacts are and have a conversation with them, understand the intensity of that contact in order to decide what public health measure will be carried out on that individual. And the last question was from Mitare Ipeng. Happy I pronounced your name correctly, I hope. I think you asked about the rise in number of cases in Abia. Yes, we were in a way surprised, but also in a way not too surprised, because we know that the testing numbers in the southeast have been low. And this has been an advocacy point for me. We've reached out to all the states in the southeast. We know people in the southeast travel a lot, so there was no reason why there wouldn't be more cases there, given the tendency to travel. So from the very beginning, we were always worried about insufficient data coming out from the southeast. Initially was thought to be about testing, but we've improved the testing, access to testing capacity now. And yeah, so the more we've seen a number of cases being reported from Abia, I think that's a good thing, because the more you identify the cases, you're then able to institute and prioritize the measures you need to prevent further cases. You're able to exclude them from the rest of society, make sure they don't transmit to others. If there are healthcare worker infections, you now prioritize IPC in the hospital. There are many things you then do that you will not do if you're not measuring. So I think even this weekend, in speaking to the health leadership in Abia State, I could see a renewed vigor in their, they're really committed to addressing the issues. So this is really what I'm encouraging every state. Listen, this is a virus. Finding the virus in your state doesn't say whether you're a good commissioner for health or a bad commissioner for health. It is a virus, it's an outbreak. The earlier we find it, the better. Nobody is criticizing Lagos for having half of the cases in the country. In fact, Lagos, we praise them for doing well because they have responded effectively. So that is really what we want to encourage every state to do. The more you find, you can then address the issues, and collectively we can get on top of this. Thank you.
I believe I have a few questions. So first of all, what's the role of the NHIS in the COVID-19 pandemic? I've been in contact with the chief executive of the NHIS, and clearly the NHIS are doing very good work supporting us. So for instance, they continue to stabilize the health system and provide service delivery by ensuring there's no disruption through the payment of capitation and fee for service in advance to the healthcare facilities, because it's important that the rest of the health system continues to function while we fight the pandemic. They've also been working with the private sector facilities to expand access to testing and care. They have provided funding for the training of healthcare workers on infection control. They've mobilized resources through the HMOs and other stakeholders. They've also pushed through information and education activities through risk communication. And finally, something that I was involved with, I know they have provided PPE to healthcare facilities and also to the non-health sector, including the Nigeria Police Force and the Security and Civil Defense, I think a week or 2 weeks ago. So yes, NHIS are doing a lot to support us, and we are grateful for that. So the second thing has to do with the protocol for evacuation of Nigerians. The Honorable Minister of Aviation will probably be able to give you further details. But the thing to remember is, what do we have? We have more than 4,000 Nigerians, possibly between 7,000 to 8,000 Nigerians outside the country. We need them to come home. How do we get them home? How quickly can we get them home? And how do we get them home in such a way that we continue to protect the public health of people in the country? So we've looked at all these options. We know the initial stages that we went through where government was funding accommodation and transport was not sustainable. It's not sustainable keeping people in hotels for 14 days and paying for their feeding, paying for their transport. And meanwhile, you're running a pandemic. And meanwhile, you know that you do not have the resources. And you know that even in the developed countries, like the UK, they cannot afford it. Today in the UK, if you land, if you have a home address, they will take your details and they will ask you to self-isolate at home. And if you don't self-isolate at home, your neighbor finds out. That neighbor has a responsibility to let the authorities know, and you will be fined £1,000. So why can't we trust our own countrymen to do the right thing? Why can't we help them to get into the country and make sure that we are able to clear this huge backlog of people in a sustainable manner? And that's what we want to do with the current protocol. We've looked at all the options. We've looked at the stage of our epidemic. We are already in a community transmission phase. We know that we are mitigating the risk by asking people to take a test before they come in. So right from the beginning, the pre-test probability of having a positive COVID result by the time they arrive in Nigeria is low because they've already been tested prior to that. In fact, their risk of getting COVID is much, much lower than the risk of somebody in Nigeria who has come in contact with a positive case, what we call the primary contacts. So the primary contacts we have, are we taking them to hotels and locking them up? We're not. So why should we be putting so much resources into people with much lower risks of transmission? So that's the first thing we had to address. The second thing is we are asking them to take a test again, just in case they are in the incubation period and we've missed it. But that test, as you know, it's not possible to test hundreds of people within a short period of time. You're taking swabs, you're taking their details before you take the swab. It will take a while before you finish with one person, 10, 15 minutes. So meanwhile, if you have 500 people landing, how long will it take you? 3 days? Will you lock them up in the airport for 3 days while you take their swabs? No. So the only option we have is to convince those that really want to come in to sign an undertaking and work with us. The only block that is preventing people from coming in, and that was reducing the number of people coming in, was the issue of accommodation. And we will take that out. We would ask those that want to come in to make sure they have arrangements for accommodation in the points of entry, which is Abuja and Lagos for now. That might change as things proceed, but for the moment, all the flights will come into Lagos and Abuja, and we will ask them to give us the time to be able to do a test on them. So they need to arrange for a place to stay in Abuja or Lagos and self-isolate until we take their swabs. And we will monitor them. Our preference is for them to stay in Lagos and Abuja for the 14 days of self-isolation so that we can follow them up. If they have symptoms, they can call us. And we can isolate them or treat them if they subsequently develop infection. But this is a pragmatic approach, gentlemen. I am sure we completely appreciate and sympathize with the people outside the country that are trying to get in. And we should put ourselves in their position. Do you want to undertake to have a period where you have to be in a town for the sake of minimizing the risk of transmission, but meanwhile be able to come in? We can accommodate up to 4 flights a week based on this. And we can clear the backlog within 3 to 4 weeks. And if there are people that really cannot come in, these are people that probably will not even be able to pay for their airfares, then that will be a different arrangement. But for the moment, our priority is let's make use of the assets we have on the ground and make sure that we clear this backlog and people can come in. And eventually, we would be opening up the skies for international travel anyway. And once we do that, all these issues will go away. But our plan at the moment is to ask people outside the country, since they're paying for their airfares anyway, to sign an undertaking that they will arrange for accommodation in Lagos and Abuja for the period of their isolation. They will soon need to be isolated, even if the repeat test here is negative for the period of 14 days, their passports will still be with the immigration authorities, so they will still have to come back for their passports anyway. And talking about passports, we do have passengers that have not collected their passport, those that came back from UK and US, they should please contact the immigration authorities at the airport and retrieve their travel documents. The other question is, what feedback did the PTF get in terms of compliance with restrictions? Well, we're only a week through the current phase, but we have a poll that we do, the NOI poll. The one that was done in the last week showed that 98% of Nigerians were aware of COVID, 93% intended to adhere to the message, 90% of the respondents trusted the source, 98% received messages on preventive measures, and 98% knew what to do. So this is now a case of translating knowledge to action. And that's why we keep on saying that this is a personal responsibility of all of us to make sure that we follow the guidelines that we have produced in order to protect ourselves and our loved ones. Thank you.
The Chair of the Presidential Task Force, Honorable Ministers, members of the PTF, ladies and gentlemen, the question to WHO was on the advice to countries on antibiotic use and the potential increase in antibiotic resistance. The COVID pandemic has led to increased use of antibiotics, which ultimately lead to higher bacterial resistance rates that will ultimately impact the burden of disease and deaths during the pandemic and beyond. New antimicrobial resistance data released by WHO shows that globally a worrying number of bacterial infections are increasingly resistant to the medicines at hand to treat them. We also know that based on evidence, only a small proportion of COVID-19 patients do need antibiotics to treat subsequent bacterial infections. And the organization has released new clinical management guidance not to provide antibiotic therapy or prophylaxis to patients with mild COVID-19 or to patients with suspected or confirmed moderate COVID-19 illness, unless there is a clinical indication to do so. We have also released a WHO off-label use of medicines for COVID-19 scientific brief and a WHO medical product alert to warn consumers, healthcare professionals, and health authorities against a growing number of falsified medical products that claim to prevent, detect, treat, or cure COVID-19. As mentioned by the DG NCDC at the last briefing, the national team has reviewed the global guidance and has contextualized it to the case of Nigeria, and there is now an updated national interim guideline for clinical management of COVID-19 released last week. And to quote from that guideline, the choice of antibiotics is based on the clinical diagnosis, the local epidemiology, and antibiotic susceptibility, as well as the treatment guidelines. So close review and monitoring of patients is therefore required to determine when to use the antibiotics. Thank you.
Good afternoon, gentlemen of the press. Regarding the question as to what mechanism do we have in place to build or to boost passenger confidence to begin to believe that civil aviation is safe for them to fly. Indeed, this is not new to civil aviation. There had been SARS before, and similar other pandemics, and civil aviation took to the challenge. However, the parallel drawn from 9/11 and COVID-19, there's a bit of difference. And this guy is known. We do know that he gives us fever. He makes us not to be able to breathe. We have shortness of breath rather. So we know him, and we know he's a droplet. We know that we have to touch him, to touch our face, mouth, and ears and nose. So he has defined himself, so we know him. Different from terrorists who carry out attacks such as 9/11. So we are very ready for him. We're getting more and more ready as we get more and more knowledge, as we get more and more to know him, so that we do everything that is possible to make sure that we do not become the mechanism, the platform by which we spread this guy. It's easy for us now that we know him. So the campaign had started from this platform to tell the public, especially in Nigeria, that we do understand perfectly the enemy. We know how he behaves, and we make sure that we do not give him the chance to harm us more. The protocols are being developed. Before the industry comes back, we would inform the public, we would sensitize the public, we would use you, the media, to tell people what our intentions are and what to do and what we expect of you. Certainly, air travel will not be as normal as used to be, just like 9/11, that makes us to remove our clothes in some cases, or scan us, and so on. So this one also would be the same, but we want to assure people that civil aviation will be extremely very safe. Unfortunately, we have this, but fortunately, we have developed mechanisms to stop them. We'll unveil them gradually as we go, and hopefully even before that, we'll be able to find the vaccine, to find the medication, and so on, so that it does not, it's of no consequence anyway. Thank you very much indeed.
The chairman of the PTF, members of the PTF, distinguished ladies and gentlemen of the press. The question is around, with the easing of the lockdown, what will be the humanitarian response going forward? First of all, let me say that humanitarian interventions occur even before the COVID-19, during lockdown or after lockdown. As issues arise, we take interventions. But for the purpose of this question, the ministry is adopting a whole of society approach as its strategy to support the poor and the vulnerable to regain their livelihood, which might have been affected by this pandemic and the lockdown. The ministry will also continue to leverage on the structures of its agencies and programs to provide assistance going forward to the people that have been affected by this pandemic and the lockdown. For instance, on the cash transfer, we have adopted a number of ongoing programs to quickly scale up the support using the existing National Social Safety Net project platform for the current chronic poor, as well as the transition poor who have been affected by the lockdown. As you may also be aware, on the onset of the pandemic, the National Social Register contained a data of about 2.6 million. Now I'm happy to say that we have about 3.6 million individuals, households that are currently in the National Social Register. And we're tapping from this register to give a cash transfer to these vulnerable households. We are also in talks with our partners, the UN, for instance, to see how we can support the communities that are now greatly affected by the pandemic. These 20 local governments that were mentioned, and maybe even more, to see how we can support these households with also another cash intervention to these households. And also on the humanitarian intervention, we are working now with the Department of the Security Service for them to provide us with information as it relates to communities that are most hit or that are facing humanitarian crisis. We have a dashboard where this information will come in, and it will indicate to us in either red or green ambers for us to quickly take intervention to these communities. So this is what the ministry is doing thus far as regards this COVID, post-COVID. Thank you very much.
Honorable Minister of State Education.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. I think the question was about fake news. That some people have been publishing when they can open. Okay, the answer is not us. Thank you. Okay, sorry. Okay, well, the fake ones are not our own. That's why they are fake. But that's the short answer. The long answer is that the ministry would not want to lead Nigerians into danger. So we are working with, that's the essence of us being in this committee in the first place. We want to be only able to open when it is safe to do so. You've heard about neighboring countries that opened and shut. You've heard about cases spiking with children getting to school. Of all the things I like to do, I wouldn't like to experiment with your children. So really, the truth is that we want a situation where once we are sure it is safe, we can then take them into school. I've just finished a meeting this morning with representatives of WAEC, NECO, NAPTEB, because I understand how that worries our parents at the moment and how anxious our children are to know what's next. What we are planning is to actually bring those exit years in first. As soon as those who are in charge of the blockade lift it. Because there's no way we can open our schools if teachers can't come. So we are looking at somewhere after when these interstate boundaries, lockdowns are lifted. Because we will need to have that kind of openness for even the children to move. So we've looked at the letters from WAEC, Ghana, WAEC, Gambia. Gambia reopened schools today. And all of these people are participants in the WAEC platform. The 5 countries, at WAEC, there are almost about 76 subjects. Nigerians are, prevalent on about 17 of them. And we need to know a timetable that will take, because it takes about 6 weeks to conclude WAEC examinations. Then you require another 6 weeks to conclude NECO examinations. Then you require another 6 weeks to conclude NAPTEB examinations. now we are all working on timetables and how to bring the timetables. What can we do? Can we use Saturdays? Can we use Sundays? What dates are available to us as soon as we can to bring them to some sort of closure so that they are available for us to use when universities or tertiary institutions open for the next academic season? And if within that period we can run our national common entrance examinations to get those who are in primary school to now move into secondary schools, all of that is what we are still working on. And it is then not possible for anybody to just release dates carelessly. And it will have to pass through this PTF first. It won't just be that the Ministry of Education on its own unilaterally has now commanded everybody to go back to school. We are running a government. It is not our prerogative to just simply tell you what to do. We will bring it to government, and government will do an appreciation of it. Last week, we were at the National Assembly. We presented the same facts to the House Committee on Basic Education and went through each of the issues with them. We can ship our people out, or not ship them out and ship them in, but ship them out safely, tell our people we are now comfortable for you to do this, and then they start doing it, and we will feel the impact altogether. So please, I still apologize to our parents to please keep working for us at home, help us keep those children safe, keep them calm, because I know that's the biggest job right now. And if you have extra my and things, just give them so that we can all be fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister of State Education. I now call on the chairman of the PTF to respond to the questions posed to him.
Members of the committee, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I think the Honorable Minister of State Education forgot to tell you that will be the new outlook as we return to school. But truly, it's a place we want to tread with caution because of the inherent danger. You can't stop the small kids from running into each other. They will continue to play because that is their nature. If children gather and they don't play, they don't mingle, they don't share fellowship, then they are not children. So there is an inherent danger at this moment. And the experiences abound all over the world. I was just reading this morning, I think, is it Israel that opened and they have to close back all the schools. Korea was even a long time ago. Israel of recent. Why? Because both teachers and people were getting infected. And imagine a school of about 2,000 or 3,000 people. That would accelerate exponentially the number that you can get in that community, because all of these people are returning back homes. So they will be very prospective carriers back to their houses. And you cannot imagine the level of transmission that would take place. My visit to the National Reference Laboratory on Saturday was an eye-opener. I had a question that had to deal with mixture in samples or mix-up in samples as to posting results that do not reflect what is happening in those states. And truly, some of you were with us on Saturday during the visit. And Chukwe, I want to recommend in one of the free days, take the entire crew on a visit so that they can have a first-hand experience of the processes. The easiest part of this exercise is collecting the samples. By the time the samples arrive at the 30 different laboratories, then you commence the processes. First, you disinfect them because they come in different shapes. And sometimes at the point of collections in the various states, the samples are not handled very well. So you first have to reorganize them. I saw it firsthand, contaminate it, take it in for processing and sorting out. They come manually because forms are filled in the different locations where the samples are being collected with the full details of the people that are being tested. That sorting has to take place. That identification has to be given for each of the samples before it is even transmitted where the entire processes will begin. So it's a very rigorous, tedious, and painstaking exercise. And that's why in my remarks this afternoon, I could not hold back but to commend the workers that I saw there. They will be standing on their feet for hours, decked in this PPE, very uncomfortable wear. We had the light one, but by the time we were within the premises, within the process of going around, after about 30 minutes, I started feeling uncomfortable, but that was the lightest of all the PPEs. So it's a very, very rigorous process. It's a very painstaking process. It's a very difficult process because at that point you need all the diligence. You need all the concentration to process that so that you don't mix up the samples. You do the proper sorting out, you do the extractions, you do the amplification, all manners of languages. And to my greatest surprise, it is not only COVID-19 that they are dealing with. They are dealing with different other things. They are dealing with Ebola, they are dealing with HIV, they are dealing with all manners of samples that have been brought from all across the nation. Even the distinction of these different samples is a lot of hard work. So few minor errors, obviously because of the analog system that we still practice. Our processes are not digitalized. We're still analog. We collect manually. We fill forms still with biro and paper. But as they transit, they begin to impute it into a system, cataloging it for the purposes of reference and putting them in their laptops and having them recorded as such. So even the sorting out. And I now begin to appreciate, because every time I will call Dr. Chukwe at about 7, 8 o'clock and ask him what are our figures for today. He says, sir, the figures can't be ready now because we are collating from all over the nation. And once we collate it, we have to enter it into the system, double check, cross-check, and first inform the states that these are your figures for today for validation before it is released. So take them on a tour so that they can have a feel of what I'm saying. That will help them better appreciate the level of work that is involved in these entire processes. So that when people complain that they took my sample yesterday and I've not gotten a result, you'll be able to explain to them that we've seen the value chain, we've seen the chain of processes, we've seen the amount of labor involved, and we can assure you that work is in process. You will get your result. Interstate travel. Amaka, you asked about interstate travel and people escaping from isolation. We do not have control over isolation centers. Isolation centers and treatment centers are under the purview of state governments. It is their responsibility to ensure that people who are in isolation center are kept under watch. And that's one of the reasons why we decided even upon the advice of the state governors, that interstate travels should still be prohibited, except for essential services. Because everybody is trying to protect his territory, to ensure that whatever I have within my state boundaries now, let me deal with it. I do not want other people to come and seed more of the infections. And let me have a control on the process. So my encouragement to the state governors is to ensure that they keep adequate security watch over the isolation and treatment centers. It's not only in Nigeria that people are escaping from isolation centers. It's a thing that has happened all over the world. I've seen it. people running away from isolation centers, especially people who are asymptomatic, who are not really sick. They are strong and well. And we should try as much as possible to keep them under watch and ensure that they are properly counseled. That's one of the reasons why in my speech this afternoon, I did speak about the mental health aspect of it, for people to be properly counseled, for people to be told that this is not a death sentence. Also, counseling should be extended even to their families. It comes with trauma. The very day you are told that you are COVID, we all took the test. And I know how eagerly we had sleepless nights waiting for the results of the test. Everybody with his heart panting. Because you don't know what would come. And it's really, it's human nature. So you need a lot of counseling, you need a lot of persuasion, you need to talk to the people to assure them that yes, if you become positive, it's not the end of life, it's not a death sentence. So many people have been positive, they have recovered from it. We will visit Gwagwalada. As a matter of fact, a lot of the members of the committee have. I have not because of the enormity of other responsibilities. But we went to Lagos. We visited the facilities in Lagos. We had cause to get to the border of where patients were being kept, because it's a highly classified area in terms of where you can proceed and where you cannot go beyond, except if you are properly kitted for that. And remember that day they were waving us from the window. We greeted them. We encouraged them. So we'll do the same to the Gwagwalada facility to see for ourselves what is available in terms of ventilators, in terms of equipment, and to ensure that if these things are not all there, we will see what we will do to provide for it. I'm glad Dr. Chikwe has addressed the issue of Abia in terms of where did the numbers come from. If you don't look, you will not find. So the government and the people of Abia have decided to own the process and drive and ramp up their searching and their testing. I was just doing a simple arithmetic of about 70,000 plus of the number of tests that we have conducted. When I looked at the 5 southeastern states, they accounted for just 1,625 as of 1st of June. 1,625 as of 1st of June. That number is an indication of under-testing. And it's a message that should go out to all the states. Don't under-test. Because when it will blow on you, you will get overwhelmed. So begin to search now and test so that you know what eventually might come your way and you begin to prepare for it. For all the states that have not been ramping up their tests, my advice to them is ramp up your tests. Test and test and test. If you do not find, thank God for it. But begin to prepare as if you already have. So that when it eventually comes, you won't be taken by surprise. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman PTF. If you do not find, thank God, but begin to prepare as if you already have it. That should be the philosophy driving us. It's been 100 days of grappling with a virus about which so much is yet to be known. It has brought out the strength and the best in our communal culture. It has also given us focus and direction for the development of our healthcare systems. In this situation, we should see motivation for action. We should build our domestic capacities, whether it's in research or in industry. We must place our healthcare system on a solid foundation for the future. To achieve this, let us collectively work to flatten the curve before the next 100 days happens on us. Take responsibility into action. Let us test and test and test. That brings us to the end of today. God bless Nigeria. We hope to see you on Thursday, God willing.
The presidential daily briefing just ended. Presidential task force on COVID-19 just ended. Let's continue with the news. In line with his constitutional responsibility, President Muhammadu Buhari has sent the nomination of Justice Monica Dongban Mensem, Acting President, Court of Appeal, to the Senate for confirmation as President, Court of Appeal. In a statement by Garba Shehu, Senior Special Assistant to the President on Media and Publicity, said Justice Dongban Mensem is a serving justice of the Court of Appeal and was recommended as it is the practice by the National Judicial Council for the nomination by the President. Let's bring you update on COVID-19. At about midnight of Sunday, 7th June 2020, the Nigeria Center for Disease Control announced 260 new cases of COVID-19 in the country, bringing the number of confirmed cases to 12,486. Of the 260 new cases, Abia State recorded the highest with 67 cases, followed by the FCT with 40 cases. Lagos has 38, Ogun 19, Gombe 16, Edo 14, and Imo State 9 cases. Kwara, Katsina, Nasarawa and Borno recorded 8 new cases each, Kaduna 6, Bauchi 5, Ekiti 4, while Niger, Ondo, Plateau, Kano and Sokoto have 2 cases each. Lagos still tops the COVID-19 chart with 5,767 cases, followed by Kano with 999 cases, and the FCT trailing Kano closely with 952 cases. 3,959 patients who recovered have been discharged, with 354 deaths recorded so far. All right, let's now join our correspondent Mitari Ikben to bring us highlight at the PTF briefing that just concluded. Mitari.
Ruth, the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 at today's briefing reviewed 100 days of the national response to the pandemic after the first index case in Nigeria was confirmed on February 27th, 2020. Among the achievements listed by the Presidential Task Force in the last 100 days include increase of the number of molecular laboratories from 2 at the point of the confirmation of the index case to about 30 nationwide today. So today we have 30 molecular laboratories in the network for testing for coronavirus. And again, over 80,000 coronavirus tests have been conducted nationwide, which accounts for the number of cases that have been confirmed as positive or negative as the case may be. Also, more than 13,000 health workers have been trained during the period, increasing the human resource for case management for coronavirus. The Presidential Task Force today also released tentative protocols for the resumption of evacuation of Nigerians abroad, and these protocols are still being fine-tuned according to the PTF. One of the protocols released is that prospective evacuees must undergo a PCR test that will be valid for 14 days before boarding and
evacuation. And also, the evacuees must also sign an undertaking to have another test done in the country within 72 hours after they arrive the country. So these are some of the protocols that have been released by the PTF, and the PTF indicated that these protocols are still being fine-tuned, and they also made it clear that evacuees will pay for their airfare and accommodation by the time they arrive the country within the 72-hour period, which they will have to undertake another test in the country. And advised Nigerians to disregard all fake news being bandied in the social media concerning the resumption date for schools. It's the Minister of State for Education says consultations are ongoing with stakeholders in the education sector, and that no date has been. These are some of the highlights, and it's back to you, Ruth.
Very much, Mitaire. Quite an update there. 100 days and still counting. We do commend the PTF for their response so far, and we apologize for the poor signal you noticed while he was giving his briefing. All right, let's look at all the issues as parts of measures to foster more harmonious working relationship between the police and citizens in the enforcement of COVID-19 guidelines. The Inspector General of Police, Mohammed Adamu, has unveiled an operational guideline and regulations for the Nigeria Police and other law enforcement agencies at the force headquarters here in Abuja. Francis Pham has that report.
Increased reported cases of domestic violence, many say, are linked to the COVID-19 restrictions. Deepening respect for the right of citizens, as well as providing new set of policing tools for tackling domestic violence, rape, child molestation, and other gender-based incidents are now on the stream, courtesy of the Nigeria Police. The Inspector General of Police, Mohammed Adamu, says the recent unfortunate developments prompted the introduction of these operational guidelines to coordinate and reshape the conduct of personnel and other law enforcement agencies in the lines of operations.
We had issues of group of people seizing the opportunity to commit one form of crime or the other. This handbook is also addressing such situations when it arises under the COVID-19 pandemic situation.
The IGP has also ordered strengthening of the Gender Desk Unit and the juvenile welfare centers across the country, and the deployment of investigative assets to deal with gender-related offenses. In addition, the IGP equally directs the Force Provost Department, X-Squad, the Public Relations Department, the Complaint Response Unit, and the Public Complaint Bureau to carry out oversight roles of adequate evaluation and monitor officers to ensure compliance with the guidelines. In Abuja, Frank Sisfom, NTA News.
Let's head to Kaduna to join Suleiman. He has more reports for us on Nationwide.
Thank you very much, Ruth, and welcome to Kaduna Network Center. Nigeria's Security and Civil Defense Corps Kaduna State Command has apprehended 21 persons for allegedly violating the lockdown order imposed on the state by authorities to curb the spread of COVID-19. The report. The outbreak of coronavirus pandemic necessitated ban on social and religious gatherings, imposition of travel restrictions, as well as closure of business centers, hotels, clubs, and recreational centers inclusive.
I was being told by the security personnel that the hotel are not allowed to be open.
The 21 suspects, including 2 hotel managers, the Nigeria Security and Civil Defense Corps Kaduna State Command says were apprehended in various clubs and hotels late in the midnight for alleged violation of the lockdown order.
Of recent, we've got records of criminal activities taking place in such locations. Criminal activities like kidnapping. We also got information that bandits converged there. And like I told you, and other criminal activities that one must not come on air to explain. And for them to have been in such places, you don't expect responsible members of the society to be out at about 1 a.m. at this period of lockdown.
The suspects will be charged to court for prosecution upon completion of investigation. And if there is anything that has attracted global attention in recent times, it is the novel coronavirus pandemic, which is taking its toll on the social and economic lives of the entire world. It respects no status, race, or borders, and has no known cure. Achari Maxwell visited a rural settlement at the outskirts of Kaduna metropolis and brings back this report.
A few minutes drive from Kaduna city center is this village, Tanhunu. A typical Fulani settlement, the men have gone out with the cows in search of greener pasture, leaving behind the weak, the women, and the little kids. Here, the residents are not unmindful of the dreaded coronavirus pandemic. So, even with a single well serving the village, adherence to COVID-19 safety protocols remains topmost.
We are obeying the lockdown order.
For Adama Suleiman and the rest at home, their lives have been altered on the account of COVID-19 lockdown. No more sales of dairy products to support the men who fend for the family.
We'll do our best and leave the rest to God.
We wash our hands regularly, and we also teach our children how to wash their hands too.
The war against COVID-19 is on globally, and Adama Suleiman, like other residents of Tanhunu, remain prayerful that the coronavirus will soon be defeated and normal life will resume. In Kaduna, Achari Maxwell, NTA News.
Thank you, Achari. Ruth, take it away from here.
Thanks, Suleiman. All right, let's look at more issues from this end. Earlier, we tried to connect with our guest via Zoom to talk about World Ocean Day. We know it's today and what role it plays in our everyday life. Well, we have him now via telephone, Dr. Victor Fodeke. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Fodeke.
It's my pleasure.
All right, now he is the former technical advisor, Climate Change, African Union, Addis Ababa. But let me start this way. Now, this year's theme is Innovation for a Sustainable Ocean. What can you tell us? Is there any link with the Sustainable Development Goals?
In fact, you will notice that there are 5 oceans that we have: the Pacific, the Atlantic, Indian, and Arctic, and the Southern. Now, the ocean, actually, one of the most important resources the ocean provides for us is food, which is the subject of the SDG number 2, Zero Hunger. So that the ocean-based food products are further connected with SDG 8 on economic growth. Despite being one of the climate change most deadly weapons, the ocean also plays a very, very important part in mitigating climate change. Now, you will agree with me that in all that we see, about 97% of all the waters on our planet is in the ocean. Only 3%, about 2/3, of which snow is about 2/3 of it, and ice is the glacier polar ice. So you can see that we are surrounded by the ocean with us. The liquid and the solid water covers roughly 3/4 of the Earth's surface. 29% of the Earth's surface is above the sea level. Now, looking at this, the ocean-based food products are further connected to the SDG 8. Now, global warming is an enormous impact with respect to the melting of glacier ice sheets. Now, you will agree with me that the higher global temperature melts the glacier ice in the polar region and brings in more water, which will result in the flooding of our coastal area.
Okay.
In the 2011, when I was in AU, there was a conflict between Bangladesh and India. They were struggling over an island. And they woke up one morning, there were warships on both sides trying to fight for that small island there. They woke up one morning and found that the island had disappeared as a result of the more water that is rising sea level.
Okay, and talking about this rising sea level, Dr. Fodeke, I'm sure you're very aware from what you're saying, which has forced a lot of people out of their homes. What could you say, what could be some of the causes of this, and how can nations adapt to it?
Thank you very much for that question. About the year 2012, the UNDP carried out a study to sensitize our coastal states on the dangers that confronts them with the sea level rise. We came to one conclusion that we are not really proactive enough because there's a lot of advocacy that people need to know of their activities will bring some consequences that may result in their losing their homes and the rest. About 60% of the world live in the coastal area, between about 60 kilometers to 100 kilometers. So we're all a coastal global citizen. And one of the things we found out is that actions by government need to be, that is policy.
Okay.
And regulatory framework to ensure that we do not exacerbate actions that can make us to be susceptible to the flooding of the sea level rise. The basic aspect of it is the level of greenhouse gases that results in the global warming. Our activities contribute to raising this temperature, and this temperature rise makes the water in the active region to melt and affect and impact our coastal area with a lot of economic activities. Look in case of this country. About 90% of our economy comes from the Niger Delta area. There's an economic security program that should be put in place. A set of proactive activity in which I will call climate proving of the infrastructure of which our livelihood depends on. If this climate proving strategy is put in place, building will be climate proof, actions will be climate proof, our policy will be climate proof.
Okay,
climate means to put in place.
Dr. Fodeke, let me hold your thoughts there. In line with what you're saying, aside the socio-economic impact, of the consequences, how has the COVID-19 impacted the World Ocean Day?
COVID-19, definitely, as we all look at it, it has affected everybody.
Yes.
Mostly the people who live in the coastal area, we know definitely that this is a new normal for them. Their means of livelihood is affected, especially those who depend on going to fish. Talk about social distancing and maintaining sort of proactive strategy to avoid contamination with the COVID-19. Their livelihood is definitely affected right now, that they cannot definitely go to look and to carry out those activities that can sustain their livelihood and to stop them from being affected by the SDG2 on hunger. That is to work within the framework of Sustainable Development Goals of preventing them from having corona and a hunger corona. I think that is very, very critical for us to bear in mind that the people who live in the coastal area have a definite serious challenges to cope with, which must be mitigated if we're going to ensure that sustainable livelihood is entrenched within their pattern of livelihood right now.
All right, thank you. All right, thank you very much. Of course, it is a collective responsibility. We also have a role to play. Dr. Victor Fodeke, he is the former technical advisor, Climate Change African Union from Addis Ababa. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Let's look at all the issues. The Nigeria's 9th National Assembly has been called upon to ensure strict adherence to the rule of law on crucial legislative issues bordering on the well-being of its staff under the National Assembly Service Commission. The call was made by the Coalition for Parliamentary Reforms during a press conference in view of the fundamental national issues around the legislative arm. National Assembly correspondent Abdullahi Aminu will tell us more.
This is a gathering of representatives from various civil societies. They are here on the alleged attempt to tamper with the resolutions on the National Assembly service set by the 8th National Assembly. The compulsory retirement age of all employees in its payroll has increased from 60 years of age or 35 years of pensionable service to 65 years and 40 years under the new service conditions.
Number of parliamentary staff who allow themselves to be used to undermine the law should bear in mind that they are putting their interest at abeyance.
If a need is coming for such a review of the resolution, it must be followed by the procedures of the National Assembly.
We want the National Assembly to maintain its independence. We want its independence to be respected.
The press conference, according to the coalition, is to draw attention on the elementary knowledge that government is a continuum, hence the need for proper adherence to the rule of law in the alteration of any legislation. In Abuja, Abdullahi Aminu, NTA News.
Let's talk agric. The federal government is not resting on its oars at ensuring that food sufficiency is achievable even as the COVID-19 continues to spread. Now, this is done through the provision of agricultural inputs to farmers across the country. The ceremony was flagged off in Jigawa State. Let's hear from Ilyasu Ali Yakubu.
With the commencement of the 2020 farming activities across the country in earnest, even in the mix of COVID-19, there is the hope that the 2020 farming season may experience a bumper harvest, going by the federal government's determined effort at ensuring food sufficiency in the country, with the commencement of distribution of fertilizers to farmers affected by floods across the country. Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development, Sadia Umar Farouk, performed the flag-off ceremony in Dutse, Jigawa State.
We appreciate this government's gesture.
This fertilizer distribution, therefore, constitutes the final phase of the input distribution aimed at helping the farmers recover from losses suffered. It is also intended as a poverty alleviation strategy, which will in turn empower our people economically.
Available records show that in the 2018 flood disaster that affected about 250,000 farmers across the country, Jigawa State was considered most affected, with more than 70,000 farmers in the disaster, and about 80,000 hectares of farmlands are said to have been washed away. The sharing formula, as adopted by the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, shows that farmers that produce maize, rice, pepper, groundnut, and cowpea get 9 bags of the fertilizer each, while that of millet gets 5 bags, guinea corn 6 bags, and sesame seed 4 bags in the northern parts of the country. The minister, who was accompanied by the Director General of NEMA, Air Vice Marshal Mohammed, also performed a similar exercise in Katsina State. Governors of Jigawa and that of Katsina State commended the federal government for the initiative and described the gesture as timely. The exercise continues in all affected states of the country. From Dutse in Jigawa State, Ilyasu Ali Yakubu, NTA News.
Thank you, Ilyasu, for that. And from Jigawa State, we're going to Port Harcourt to join Debabari for more reports.
Welcome to Port Harcourt. The River State Cassava Processing Company will soon be operational with the capacity to create over 4,000 jobs. Ogediek reports that the governor made this known after inspecting the cassava processing plant at Afam, Oyiwood local government area of the state.
In pursuance of his vision to diversify the state's economy through agriculture and create jobs for its teeming youths, Governor Wike has taken the initiative to complete the abandoned state cassava processing company.
One thing that is important about this project is that, one, that is going to buy off all the cassava from the local farmers.
Governor Wike said 70% of the project's equity is owned by the state government in partnership with Shell Petroleum Development Company, SPDC of Nigeria. Managing Director of the River State Cassava Processing Company, Ruben Jensen, noted that the cassava processing plant, when completed, will provide an enabling environment for smallholder farmers and increase their revenue base.
It will give a fair opportunity for the farmers in River State to sell their crops to an industrial outlet and also make sure that we set the pace for the industrialization of the area.
Mr. Jensen commended the state governor for embarking on the project, which he described as the first of its kind in sub-Saharan Africa. In Port Harcourt, Ogediek, NTA News.
Concerned about the alarming cases of rape in Nigeria, residents in Calabar, Cross River State, under the urges of Calabar Against Rape movement, took to the streets to campaign against the girl-child sexual molestation and other harmful practices meted out against the female gender. Arit Ndem reports.
With the increasing rate of rape in Nigeria, including Cross River State, some group of persons in Calabar took to the street to condemn the act, create awareness on the need for everyone to add voices against rape in the society. The campaign is geared towards advocating a political will and implementing same to check abuses of rape on the girl child who needs to be protected and granted freedom of expression.
Of rape is the rapist and is the only cause. Consent is compulsory. It's time to break the bro code. You see rape, you report rape.
No, it's a complete sentence.
Calabar against rape! Calabar against rape!
1 month ago, a man of 70-something years raped a 3-year-old child. Why? This is wrong. I don't know why they should be doing that. So the government should do something about it, please.
Anyone that is caught in this action, in fact, should be killed.
The group also urged the government to put up more stringent measures that will help promote investigation of rape cases in Calabar. Ndem, NTA News.
Dry season this year has stretched longer than usual with only intermittent rains. Residents of Yenagoa, the Bayelsa capital, are calling on the state government to utilize the period to reconstruct some internal roads that are in disrepair. Ebinimes Ditimoyola reports.
The construction of good road network for easy human and vehicular movement is a core component of towns and cities, of which Yenagoa, the Bayelsa state capital, cannot be left out. 24 years of its creation, Yenagoa, the Bayelsa state capital, observers believe is yet to wear the look of a state capital, particularly in the area of good road network.
We are only appealing to the state government to see that they should work on this road.
About how many years now? This PDP road, they worry us well.
I park my keke at the PDP filling station there. The road is very bad.
The government help us do the road gallop too much, so that at least things go to move on. The rainy season now almost now we use for here.
They also emphasize the need for government to construct good drainage system, unlike the shallow and narrow ones that do not allow for free flow of water that have contributed to the fast deterioration of many roads in the state capital. In Yenagoa, Ebinimi Zitimiola, NTA News.
And as our bit from here is back to route for the rest of the news. Good evening.
Thanks, Tibabari. With more than 90 transmission projects completed or ongoing since 2016, stakeholders have continued to applaud the federal government's interventions in improving electricity consumption and repositioning the power sector in the last 5 years. Guests on NT's Good Morning Nigeria advocated a common vision across the power value chain and effective coordination of critical players in the sector for greater service delivery. Lydia Sampson reports.
Some of the gains recorded in the power sector in the last 5 years include the resumption of the Mambila hydroelectric power project after 40 years of neglect, and the stepping up of generation capacity with improved 132 and 330 kVA substations nationwide. The Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission has also recently issued an order capping estimated billing by distribution companies. In the light of these interventions and ongoing efforts, the Minister of Power, Salim Mamman, believes Nigerians are served improved electricity compared to what obtained in the past.
If you now take quality of services, we have improved our services. Before this government, we give lights not more than less than 10 hours in a day. But today I can tell you we give lights from 18 to 24 hours in a day. It's also a significant improvement. Kashimbila has been completed, which is about 40 megawatts. Dadinko also completed.
The federal government's deal with renowned power company Siemens of Germany is also expected to address issues of transmission and distribution of electricity to Nigerians.
You must first of all ensure that the handshake, the interface between the parties is aligned and working. Is such that you are able now to ensure that you have a company like Siemens with very high track record coming in to ensure that those interface issues that don't allow power that is generated to get into the transmission system and then move on into distribution systems are handled.
Some solutions were proffered for utilizing generation capacity in this sector.
And they signed it with the IOCs that see, at any time T, this quantity has to be supplied to the domestic. Outside this domestic quantity, the rest, you're free to export it. The same thing needs to come to the power sector. That is the solution to this excess capacity as opposed to utilization.
The issue of metering is a major strategic pillar. Like I said, AEDC has been able to do 100,000 by 5th of June, in spite of the COVID issue. And we are going ahead to even do more once the meter asset providers are available.
The guests equally identified the need for review of key performance indices across the value chain as part of the way forward. In Abuja, Lydia Sampson, NTA News.
1 week after the federal government's announcement of further reduction of pump price of petrol to between 123 naira to 121 naira, no petrol station has complied with the order in Makurdi, the Benue State capital. Godwin Inaleko, who monitored the situation, now reports.
The Petroleum Product Regulatory Agency announced last week that both major and independent marketers are to comply with the new pump price and dispense the product within the price range of 121 naira 50 kobo and 123 naira 50 kobo per litre. However, this is not the situation in Makurdi, as all the petrol stations in the town are still selling petrol at the rate of 125 naira and 123 naira 50 kobo per litre.
It depends how we buy from them. That's what we normally sell. Maybe they, like NNPC are selling 121 from us, 121.50. But you can't allow us to sell that 121.50 that we are buying from them.
Motorists expressed worry over the non-implementation of the directive by the federal government, which is expected to take effect from the 1st of June 2020.
The country has what it is to give us this even at 100 naira per litre.
We have been suffering for fuel before, and they always carry the fuel up, always.
Controller, Department of Petroleum Resources, DPR, Benue State could not be reached for comment.
In Makurdi, Godwin Inalegu, NTA News.
The Zakat and Sadakat Foundation of Federation of Muslim Women Association of Nigeria, Form 1, has disbursed 100,000 naira each to 18 women, children and the sick to elevate poverty among members of the Ummah and the society at large. Hawa Gimba, who witnessed the disbursement, now reports.
Efforts to redistribute zakat and sadakat wealth from the rich to the poor. The Federation of Muslim Women Association of Nigeria, Form 1, is carrying out the disbursement of cash worth 100,000 naira each to 18 people in the FCT. Among beneficiaries are widows, orphans, the sick and the needy. President FCT Form 1, Bola Usman, says zakat and sadakat are acts of giving, which is one of the obligations Muslims must observe to help in supporting the needy in the society.
Zakat should be given out at the right time, as far as we are praying at the right time. It is raising the consciousness of Muslims that zakat is necessary, zakat is an obligation, zakat is what we need that can bind the poor and the rich together.
Some of the committee members of Zakat and Sadakat Foundation of Form 1 say with the coronavirus pandemic ravaging the world, the intervention is rife to help